Welcome back to Coins Numismatic Series, where every old coin has a story, and sometimes that story is worth far more than 1 cent. Today, we are going deep into two fascinating Lincoln wheat pennies that millions of Americans once carried in their pockets, spent in stores, dropped into jars, and eventually forgot about. But here is where things get exciting. While most examples of these coins are affordable, exceptional condition, rare varieties, and genuine mint errors can transform an ordinary-looking wheat penny into a highly desirable collectible. So, before you dismiss that old copper cent as just another worn penny, take a closer look, because the date, mint mark, color, strike, and even tiny differences in the lettering can completely change its numismatic importance. 1957 D Wheat Penny 1 cent coin. The 1957 D Lincoln Wheat Penny is one of the most interesting late-date wheat cents because it belongs to the final years of a design that had already become an American numismatic classic. The Lincoln cent debuted in 1909, making Victor David Brenner's portrait of Abraham Lincoln the first regular-issue United States coin design to feature a real historical American president. On the reverse, Brenner placed 2 wheat ears surrounding the denomination and inscriptions, creating the design that collectors would eventually call the wheat cent. That reverse remained in production until 1958, which means the 1957 D is just 1 year away from the end of the series. In 1959, the reverse was replaced with the Lincoln Memorial design, so in 1957, D carries the atmosphere of the closing chapter of the original wheat penny era. The D in 1957 D is extremely important because it tells us where the coin was struck. The Denver Mint produced this issue, and production was enormous. PCGS records a mintage of 1,051,342,000 pieces, making the 1957 D a very common Lincoln wheat cent in circulated grades. That huge production number immediately tells us something important about value. The date alone does not make this coin rare. Millions upon millions entered circulation, and a substantial number survived. PCGS estimates roughly 105 million examples survive across all grades. So if you find a normal, worn 1957 D wheat penny in an old collection or jar, it is usually not a rare treasure simply because it is more than 60 years old. The coin itself measures approximately 19 millimeters across and weighs about 3.11 grams. Its composition is the traditional bronze alloy used for Lincoln cents of this era, approximately 95% copper with the remainder consisting primarily of tin and zinc. The edge is plain rather than reeded. These specifications are useful when examining an unusual example because weight and physical dimensions can sometimes help identify damage, alteration, or an unusual mint error. On the obverse, you see Brenner's familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln facing right. The inscription Liberty appears to the left of Lincoln's portrait, while I in God We Trust stretches across the upper portion of the coin. The date 1957 appears in front of Lincoln's portrait, and the Denver mint mark D sits beneath the date area. Collectors should pay close attention to the date and mint mark because this is exactly where genuine varieties and mint-made anomalies can become interesting. The reverse is the instantly recognizable wheat penny design. 2 stylized wheat ears frame the inscriptions United States of America, 1 cent, and E pluribus unum. The wheat ears symbolize agriculture and prosperity, while the overall simplicity of the reverse gives the coin a distinctive visual identity that is immediately recognizable even after decades of circulation. For many collectors, this reverse is the main reason wheat cents remain so popular today. Now we get to the most important subject for anyone hoping to find a valuable 1957 D condition. The ordinary circulated coin is common, but high-grade examples are a completely different story. PCGS describes the 1957 D as very common except in grades above MS66. That distinction is crucial. A coin can have a mintage exceeding 1 billion and still become valuable if very few examples survive in exceptional condition. Color also matters enormously. Professional grading generally separates copper cents into brown, and red categories. A brown coin has experienced significant natural color change and generally carries less premium than a comparable red example. Red-brown pieces retain some of their original copper color, while red examples preserve a much larger portion of the bright original red appearance associated with freshly struck copper. For a 1957 D, a sharply struck, clean, blazing red coin can be dramatically more desirable than a common brown circulated example. PCGS specifically notes that collectors should inspect 1957 D cents for carbon spotting and seek examples that are both fully struck and free from distracting spots. This is an important lesson in Lincoln cent collecting because tiny carbon spots, stains, marks, or weakly struck details can prevent an otherwise promising coin from reaching the highest grades. The market demonstrates just how dramatic this condition difference can become. PCGS lists an auction record of $6,600 for a 1957 D-graded MS67 Plus red, sold by Stack's Bowers in 2019. That is an extraordinary result for a coin with a mintage exceeding 1 billion, and it proves that rarity in numismatics is not always about how many coins were originally struck. Sometimes the real rarity is finding one that survived in spectacular condition. At the same time, not every high-grade coin will bring thousands of dollars. Auction results can vary significantly depending on certification, color designation, eye appeal, strike quality, population data, provenance, and competition among bidders. For example, a 1957 D-graded MS67 red by NGC sold for $95 at a 2021 Stack's Bowers auction. PCGS's later data also shows how scarce the very highest grades are relative to ordinary examples. This enormous spread demonstrates why collectors should never assume that every uncirculated 1957 D is automatically valuable. The error and variety side of the 1957 D is where things get especially exciting. Variety specialists have documented multiple double-die obverse varieties for this date. Variety Vista catalogs numerous 1957 D double-die obverse listings, while Wexler's reference material documents examples showing doubling in areas such as Liberty and portions of the date. Some varieties are much more significant than ordinary machine doubling, and identifying the difference requires careful examination. There are also repunched mint-mark varieties associated with the 1957 D. Wexler's reference material lists several 1957 D RPM varieties, including examples described as D over D or multiple punched mint marks. These varieties are particularly interesting because the mint mark was punched into the working die separately during the era when mint marks were applied manually. A genuine RPM can show secondary remnants of the original mint mark beneath or beside the final D. But collectors need to be careful here. Not every coin with what appears to be doubling is a valuable double die. Machine doubling, die deterioration, abrasion, scratches, die chips, and post-mint damage can create appearances that resemble genuine varieties. Wexler's research on 1957 D cents demonstrates that some pieces previously thought to represent double dies were later reconsidered. That is why serious collectors compare suspected varieties with established references rather than relying on photographs or a quick glance under ordinary lighting. So what should you do if you find a 1957 D Wheat Penny? First, identify the date and confirm the D mint mark. Next, examine the coin under magnification. Study Liberty, the date, Lincoln's eye and surrounding facial details, and the mint mark. Look for clear, raised separation rather than flat shelf-like machine doubling. Check the coin's color, surface quality, strike, and signs of cleaning. A naturally toned coin with original surfaces can be much more desirable than a shiny coin that has been harshly polished. For the average collector, the 1957 D is an excellent entry point into wheat cent collecting because it is affordable, historically important, and plentiful enough to study without fear of handling an ultra-rare rarity. But for advanced collectors, the real challenge is finding a superb red example, a top-grade certified coin, or a genuine double die or repunched mint mark variety. That combination of accessibility and potential rarity is what keeps the 1957 D interesting. And remember the most important lesson: a huge mintage does not mean there is nothing to collect. The 1957 D demonstrates that ordinary coins can become extraordinary when preservation, color, strike, or variety enters the equation. This little copper cent may have been worth only 1 cent when it was released, but today, The right example can command hundreds or even thousands of dollars. 1952, D. Wheat Penny 1-cent coin. Now let's travel 5 years further back to the 1952 D. Lincoln Wheat Penny, a coin produced during a very different moment in American history. The United States was in the middle of the Korean War, the post-war economy was developing, and the country was moving deeper into the modern industrial and technological age. Yet in everyday commerce, the humble Lincoln cent remained almost unchanged. The same familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln occupied the obverse, and the same wheat ears continued to frame the reverse. The design was already more than 4 decades old, but it remained one of the most recognizable coins in American circulation. The 1952 D was struck at the Denver Mint, and its mintage was 746,130,000 pieces. That is a massive production figure, although noticeably lower than the more than 1 billion 1957 D cents. The Denver Mint was producing enormous quantities of cents during this period because the 1-cent denomination was essential to everyday commerce. The 1952 production totals also show just how dominant Denver was that year. The 1952 D output was substantially greater than the combined production of the Philadelphia and San Francisco mints for the same denomination. The basic specifications are familiar. The coin is approximately 19 millimeters in diameter, weighs about 3.11 grams, has a plain edge, and uses the traditional 95% copper, 5% tin and zinc composition. Its physical characteristics make it unmistakably part of the classic bronze Lincoln cent era. The obverse features Victor David Brenner's right-facing portrait of Abraham Lincoln. Above Lincoln's head is "I in God We Trust." To the left is Liberty, while the date 1952 appears in front of the portrait. Directly below the date is the small D mint mark identifying Denver as the striking facility. Although the design looks simple, experienced collectors know that every area of the obverse can contain clues about strike quality, die wear, varieties, and condition. Turn the coin over, and the famous wheat reverse appears. The 2 wheat ears create a strong frame around United States of America, 1 cent, and E pluribus unum. This reverse was already a familiar sight to Americans in 1952, but within only a few more years it would disappear forever from regular United States circulation. That gives the 1952 D an important place within the later history of the wheat cent series. From a value standpoint, the normal 1952 D is generally an affordable coin. Its large mintage means that circulated examples are not inherently rare. Current market guides commonly place ordinary circulated pieces in the low-value range, with premiums increasing as the grade improves. One market guide updated in 2026 estimates average condition examples around a few cents to a small fraction of $1, while uncirculated examples can rise into the dollar range and beyond depending on grade and appearance. These guide values should be treated as general indications rather than guaranteed selling prices, because actual transactions vary with condition, color, certification, and buyer demand. But the 1952 D becomes much more interesting when you move into mint state. PCGS records a major auction result of $1,380 for a brown example graded MS63, while the red-brown variety has a recorded auction result of $360 for MS65RB. The red designation can create even more substantial premiums at the highest grades. PCGS records an auction result of $3,840 for a 1952 D-graded MS67 Plus RD at a 2023 Heritage Auction sale. That price difference teaches us one of the most important principles in copper coin collecting. Condition is everything. A 1952 D that circulated for years may have scratches, dark coloration, flattened wheat lines, and worn lettering. A coin that remained untouched in a roll or collection may preserve sharp detail and attractive original color. The second coin can be worth dramatically more even though both pieces were struck from the same date and mint. Color is particularly important. A brown 1952 D may be inexpensive in circulated grades, while a red-brown example with attractive surfaces can bring a stronger premium. A genuinely red coin with excellent luster, sharp details, and minimal spots can become a serious condition rarity. Collectors should therefore resist the temptation to clean a dark copper penny in an attempt to make it look bright. Cleaning can damage the original surfaces and often destroys the very qualities that professional graders and experienced collectors want to see. The 1952 D is also particularly interesting because it has documented over mint-mark varieties. PCGS lists 1952 D over mint-mark varieties in brown, red-brown, and red categories, and it also catalogs a 1952 D/S over mint-mark variety identified as FS 511. This means the mint-mark area deserves very close inspection. The 1952 D/S variety is especially fascinating because it reflects the minting practices of an earlier era, when mint marks were punched individually into working dies rather than being incorporated into the die during modern die production. A coin showing evidence of one mint mark punched over another can provide a direct glimpse into how coins were manufactured. The FS 511 variety is therefore not merely a damaged D or an odd-looking mark. It is a documented die variety that specialists can study and attribute. When searching for one, magnification is essential. Examine the D beneath the date area carefully and look for shapes or remnants that do not belong to the normal mint mark. However, this is another area where caution is critical. A damaged or scratched mint mark can imitate a repunched or over mint mark appearance. Collectors should compare the suspected coin with recognized variety photographs and attribution references before assigning a premium value. The 1952 D can also display other forms of mint-made imperfections, including die cracks, die chips, strike problems, and doubling. But the presence of an unusual mark does not automatically make a coin rare. A true error or recognized die variety must be distinguished from ordinary production characteristics and post-mint damage. Professional attribution becomes especially worthwhile when the coin is in excellent condition or appears to match a recognized variety. Another major factor is strike quality. On a wheat cent, the wheat ears and central lettering should be examined carefully. A strong strike can preserve the fine details that separate a premium coin from a merely uncirculated one. Look at Lincoln's hair, cheek, jawline, coat details, the lettering, and the wheat stalks. Any significant weakness can limit the grade, while crisp detail can increase desirability. The collector interest surrounding the 1952 D comes from several directions at once. Beginners appreciate it because it is affordable and easy to understand. Wheat cent collectors want it as part of a complete date and mint mark collection. Variety specialists are attracted to the over mint mark and D/S possibilities. Advanced collectors pursue the finest red examples because high-grade copper coins become increasingly difficult to locate without carbon spots, marks, stains, or color problems. And that is why this coin deserves attention, even though more than 746 million were struck. Mintage tells us how many coins were produced, but survival, condition, variety, and collector demand determine how many are truly desirable today. PCGS's population and auction information illustrates that distinction perfectly. An ordinary 1952 D can be inexpensive, while an elite red example can enter a completely different price category. If you have a 1952 D wheat penny, start with the basics. Confirm the date and mint mark. Weigh the coin if necessary and examine its surfaces. Determine whether it is brown, red-brown, or naturally red. Look carefully around the mint mark for an over mint mark or D/S possibility. Then inspect the entire coin for unusual doubling, die cracks, chips, or other legitimate mint-made characteristics. Avoid cleaning, polishing, scraping, or applying chemicals. Original surfaces are far more important than artificial brightness. For an ordinary circulated 1952 D, the financial value may be modest, but its historical value is much greater. It is a genuine survivor from early 1950s America, a period of geopolitical tension, industrial expansion, and rapid social change. Every mark on a circulated example tells part of its journey through commerce. And when you encounter an unusually sharp, original, high-grade, or recognized variety, that same little penny can suddenly become a serious numismatic collectible. The 1952 D and 1957 D together demonstrate exactly why Lincoln wheat cents remain so popular. One comes from the middle of the final decade of the wheat reverse, while the other sits almost at the end of the entire design. Both were struck in enormous quantities, yet both can become valuable through exceptional preservation, scarce varieties, and legitimate mint-made errors. The key is learning what to look for instead of judging a coin by its date alone. So the next time you encounter an old copper penny with a wheat stalk on the back, don't rush past it. Turn it over, check the date, find the mint mark, study the surfaces, and examine the details. That worn little cent could be nothing more than a common collectible, or it could be an unusually preserved example, a recognized variety, or a coin with an error that deserves much closer attention. This is exactly what makes numismatics so addictive. The treasure isn't always obvious. Sometimes it is hidden in a tiny letter, a double detail, a mint mark punched twice, a pristine copper surface, or a coin that somehow escaped decades of circulation. And that is why, here at Coins Numismatic Series, we keep looking closer. Because every coin has a story, and sometimes the smallest coin can hold the biggest surprise.